A big thanks to Shardbugs for sponsoring this event.
Oh, let me tell you, boils and ghouls, that pumpkin spice eggnog has a real kick to it. Oh man, what time is it? What day is it? What year is it? Oh no!
So I learned a few things trying to run the Skulzy Spook-tacular game jam. First of all, it's hard to run a game jam. Secondly, it's really hard to run a game jam by yourself. And thirdly, it is extremely hard to run a game jam about tabletop games. I mean, I saw how GMTK runs their jams and thought, I can do that. I won't get nearly this many entries. I can handle this. Oh my sweet summer me. I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have seen the obvious problem with being the one judge of a jam that has a rule requiring any game submitted to be able to handle 2 or more players, but here we are. Because there are 2 things that give Game Maker's Toolkit an advantage. First of all, he crowdsources his judging by having his viewers play the games to create a shortlist. And then secondly, his jam is for video games. You can play a video game jam game for like 20 minutes to get a good feel of how it is and write up your review. But for tabletop games, you have to arrange times for people to meet up and play, and you could easily spend 20 minutes just reading the rules. Combine this with the fact that I was trying to judge this alone, and the best I can hope for in a lot of places is a remake of Jerry's game. Thankfully, I am pretty good at understanding the feel of a game by checking out its rules, and so I have managed to make a short list of what I think are the most interesting entries. Now, there were a lot of entries in this game, and I'm sorry that not all of them are being featured here, but you can play all of these games for free on the itch.io page. So, as illustrated back in October, the theme for the jam was time. An admittedly softball concept to see how people would explore the concept. And a lot of the most notable entries adhered well to the prompt in terms of both mechanics and theme, and I got a number of entries that actually really surprised me. Of course, as the channel is mostly about trading card games, I did get a lot of games made in the image of trading card games, with a built deck for each player. There were actually quite a few of these, usually involving pulling minions from different points in time. But for a solid combination of both mechanics and theming, I'm going with Agents of Time and its Paradox mechanic. Agents of Time is a victory point game where players work through the time stream to try to secure enough victory points to build a monument, and Paradox is one of its alternative loss conditions. Making mistakes in the time stream will inevitably cause time paradoxes, and if you ever accumulate 20 paradox, the time stream corrects itself by eliminating you. However, players are able to willingly accumulate paradox to do things like, say, reduce the cost of the cards they're putting into play. It's like if Magic the Gathering had a mode where Channel was permanently turned on for every player. Now that would be a heck of a Commander game, wouldn't it? The result is a game of brinksmanship, where you have to choose between trying to play it safe or willingly accumulating paradox in an effort to get ahead, and I love games where players can risk overextending themselves. It is a fantastic concept both thematically and mechanically, one that promotes difficult choices while fitting in perfectly with the theme. Now, while these sorts of games took up a lot of entries, I did leave the door open to more party-style games, where players work off of a matching fixed deck. A common sight in these party games, particularly the cooperative games, was Countdown, where the players had a time limit to either prepare for a big encounter, such as in Dragon's Doom, or accomplish a number of tasks, as seen in the comedy-drenched The Future is Cal. But what happens if you turn this concept on its head? Well, you would get Waiting in the Cold. In this game, players actually want the timer to run out because that is when rescue will arrive. But until that time, players will be carefully nursing their limited heat resource, alternating between building it up or spending it to speed up the timer. But be careful, as more and more players drop below 0 heat, their options become slimmer and slimmer. And if they can't warm back up before the event deck gets used up, they'll have frozen solid by the time rescue arrives. This one little trick, where the time limit is the thing you want to reach rather than avoid, while still having the pressures tied to these sorts of time limit games, gives Waiting in the Cold a unique advantage. Now, a mechanic I saw a lot in these party games that I actually really enjoyed was one where players competitively build a timeline, then play that timeline over again with whatever new cards have been added to it Groundhog style. Or like building a line of code and hitting run. The potential for this kind of game is limitless, and there were a lot of good ones, but the one I liked the most was the humbly named Time Loop. In Time Loop, players are adding cards to 3 parallel timelines. Each card played has a cause and effect, and if you want to play a card, unless you're playing that card to a new timeline, you have to match the colors. Like the cause of the new card must match the effect of the card it is played next to, or vice versa. But when, after a new card is added, its exposed end matches the opposite exposed end on another line, like if you play a card with a blue cause while the timeline has a blue effect on an end, then it triggers every card in all of those matching timelines, creating Balatro-level cascades of points and modifiers that, while a massive headache to do by hand, might do well with, again, this sort of Balatro-like automated digital approach, where you don't know the results of the cascade for sure until you play it out. There were also some party games that took a more unique approach. For example, a lot of games put the countdown timers on the cards themselves, but none did it quite like Detonate. Detonate is a game of fighting time bombs, where you play cards that start counting down while dealing with your opponent's cards that are about to cook off. A lot of games had cards with countdowns, but something about staring a ticking time bomb in the face makes it so much more intense. And now a couple more honorable mentions. Haunted Harvest, while maybe not the best at adhering to the theme, did strike me as a surprisingly complete game that would probably go over really well with a younger or more casual audience. Between picking a Halloween costume with a special power and dealing with strange monsters to collect candy, just be sure that it includes a big, bright orange D12 dice with it when it moves to production. Magic Till Midnight is a trick taker that struck me as more of a love letter crowd sort of game, where Cinderella tries to get close to the prince before the clock hits midnight. But for the realm of sheer creativity, I gotta give it up to Ogre Time, a deck builder about office politics and time management. Imagine if The Office, but it's all ogres. I don't know, I might watch that. Playing out over the course of one 5-day work week, players compete to score contracts, take seminars, and complete tasks in their limited work time. Of course, if you want to try to get an edge over Ogrina over on Cubicle 5, you can always work overtime, or the even more dangerous Ogre Time. Pulling an all-nighter lets you monopolize tasks, but you also accumulate burnout, which affects your performance the next day. It is yet another one of those risk-reward systems that I love, and you just know everybody's going to be maxing out the coffee on the final day to try to get those last lousy points. Never thought a game about crunch culture would be the party-style game that tripped my trigger the most, but here we are. So yeah, those are, I think, the most interesting games and concepts to come out of the first ever Skulzy Spook-tacular Game Jam. As mentioned in the disclaimer, the creators of these games maintain full ownership of them, and a few seem like they might actually be good for production with a hint of polish. Might like a shout out in the rules manual, but nothing else really. And frankly, I'm glad I went with participation raffle prizes because, honestly, these were the only things that came out on time. I have, at the very least, learned a lot about how much work operating a jam like this truly is. If I do this again this coming October, I will probably draft a bunch of additional judges to help me figure out which games are the winners, along with a possible time extension as well, as the folks trying to test their games have the same problems I do.
And so, boils and ghouls, that brings us to the end of our first ever Skulzy Spook-tacular Game Jam. As expected, it was a complete and total train wreck! Oh yeah! All of the games can be found on the itch.io page, so all of you can get a gruesome look at these amazing games. Thanks to everyone for participating, and until next time, this is your boy Skulzy saying, Happy Hallow Scream! Oh, better slow down. Oh.